welcome back to my channel. It's Christine Grace and welcome to In Conversation with Christine. Today I'm joined by two lovely guests. I've got Rayla Campbell joining me and Katy, is it Faust or Faust? I don't know if my accent is messing it up.
It's Faust, and all those
Faust.
literary buffs know exactly what I'm talking about because there is a famous play, famous opera by a man named Goethe in Germany, and Faust is the man who sold his soul to the devil. So you can imagine all the Faustian bargain quips that I get on Twitter.
Okay, noted. Katy, Faust. So today we've got some very interesting topics to get into, but I just want to pass over to the guests first of all. Rayla, do you mind telling us who you are, sort of your journey to where you're at now in life and what it is that you're focused on?
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much, Christine, for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure. As I ran for Secretary of State, my name is Rayla Campbell. I ran for Secretary of State of Massachusetts last year. I was able to be the first African-American woman to ever make statewide ballot in Massachusetts history, then go on to be the party nominee and endorsed candidate and get the most votes for a Republican woman ever in Massachusetts history, which was very exciting for me. But a lot of people don't know that because there's an R after my name, not a D after my name. So I got a lot of pushback from a lot of people because of my fight with protecting children's rights, protecting our election integrity, standing up against the indoctrination. I have three beautiful mixed children of my own. And it started years back when my kids, I put them in public school. And this was the first time. And I was really, really pumped. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be one of those townie moms, going to be all in the schools and involved in everything. And 2 weeks into my middle daughter being in kindergarten, she came home and said, Mommy, I learned about Martin Luther King. And I was like, great, I'm going to hear that I have a dream. And I'm, what did you learn? And she said, I learned he was killed by a white man. My jaw dropped to the ground. I was completely appalled. I sent an email. I called for a meeting the next day with the head of the schools, the principal, superintendent, all of them. And I ripped them a new one because one, my daughter's only 5 years old. What are you teaching her about somebody killing somebody else instead of teaching the amazing speech that Dr. King went out there and performed? So that for me was just like, it was appalling. So I ended up ripping my kids out of school and putting them into private school, thanks to the great community that I have in my local Catholic church. The sisters were like, your daughters are amazing. They need to be in this setting. So I pulled them out, and I also took 150 families with me because I let them have it. And I did not keep my mouth quiet. Then I started going to school committee meetings and seeing what was going on. And all I could hear was it was just completely targeting and wokeness. And it was all like, oh, because your color of your skin, you're oppressed. And because of the color of their skin, they're the oppressor. So I'm like, wait. You're trying to teach my kid that they're both the oppressed and the oppressor? Well, let me give you a news flash. They must be double and triple oppressed because they're also Jewish. So, explain that to me. So they didn't like that. They cut off my mic. They were very upset. And I decided I'm going to do something about what's going on, because at that time, Ayanna Pressley was running for Congress, and that was her first term. She didn't have a Republican challenger. And I'm like, why don't we have anybody running as a Republican challenger? So I decided to jump in. I came in late in the game. So I ran as a write-in. And this was during COVID. And what they did was they dropped the number of signatures required to get on the ballot to 1,000 signatures. And I was like, all right, I can do that. And as a write-in, I got 1,200. And then I went into the Secretary of State's office and they said, no. You have to get the pre-COVID standard because we have an opinion of the law and get 2,000 signatures, which is a violation of my constitutional rights and the current law that was in place. So again, they thought that was going to knock me down and back me down. And that just gave me fire. And that's when I decided, if he's going to keep me off the ballot, he's up for election. Somebody's got to challenge him. Again, no Republicans want to step up and do it. So I decided to do it, which made him a candidate. They also let him go out there and target me, call me COVID runoff wastewater. I'm Massachusetts' #1 white supremacist. I was attacked horribly by the head of BLM and Antifa, who is now federally indicted. We won't even mention her name. That gives her clout. But I was that target. And then I decided to go and explore what was happening with our schools and what they're teaching, because parents came to me and said, did you know that this book is being pushed to seventh graders in school? And at the time, I had no idea. My kids aren't in that grade yet. So I looked into the book, and it was genderqueer, and I was appalled. So I went to around and I showed, and I made my own media. So I made the news actually cover it. And then the head of Channel 4, John Keller at Large, he does all the political stuff, said that these books don't exist and I need to get my head out of the gutter. Oh, okay. So I went around to every single public library in my local community, live on Facebook, and was like, what do we have here? They say these books don't exist. And they're all in the children's department, and they are advocated for children. We're talking about huge signs, huge billboards with books that tell children to taste their own bodily fluids.
What?
I was disgusted. So I decided to show it to a lot of people in the cities. And I went to Boston Public Library, Brockton Public Library, and I made sure that I got the books from those libraries, and then I brought it to the parents in the community. They had no idea what was going on. And that is why I'm still in this fight and I'm still exposing it. And when it came to elections, we were watching how they were manipulating the elections with, when you see the media didn't even interview me once. They said it was because I wasn't vaccinated, but they interviewed somebody else outside. But then they were like, no, not you. Can't even come on the property. Again, an FCC violation. So when you see what's happening to President Trump, they're doing the same thing to every single one of us, everyday local people who are out there being freedom fighters and fighting on the truth and what is actually going on in our system. And the target on our children right now is appalling. And they are literally trying to teach, like I said in my speech, if you want to check that out, I gave a speech at the convention. But like I said, and that is what is happening right now to our 5-year-olds, with trying to tell them that they may have been misgendered when they were born and exposing them to the ABCs of activism. When did we get so far away from reading, writing, and arithmetic? These kids are graduating high school with a 5th grade education. They are completely confused in what they are doing in their life and their aspects. And a lot of them think that this is a fad. This is a fad. Well, when you're mutilating your body and you're taking puberty blockers, you're actually destroying your body for the rest of your life. Yeah. And we already know that because these children are going sterile. And it goes back to what the media and the left is trying to push on everybody, as well as the abortion issues. And I will always be up there standing up, fighting for our rights, being the voice of the people, because our Constitution says we the people, and these elected officials are supposed to be protecting our God-given rights that are given to us by God, that are protected by the Constitution. So right now they're all in violation, and that's why I'm out here fighting.
Wow, quite a portfolio that you've got there, Rayla. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've got loads of questions. But before I get to those, I'm about to rack up my brain with even more questions. And Katy, ask you to tell me and the people, who are you? What do you do? How have you got to where you are now? And what is it that you're passionate about?
Well, I love following Rayla, because I really feel like, how are we going to turn this country around? Moms like Rayla, who are like, no, not my kid. Get your hands off my kid. Mm-hmm. And then she goes, it's not just about keeping your hands off my kids. Actually, what we need to be all about is child protection for all kids. Yeah. And that's, what she's doing. She's exposing how it's not enough for her to just pull her kids out and protect them. She's like, no child should be victimized in these ways. And so I just really appreciate that. Like, it's just principled child protection in action through one woman's story, which is amazing. So 3 cheers. I love it. I am the founder and president of a children's rights nonprofit called Them Before Us. And the idea is we prioritize children above the desires and the interests and the feelings and the identities of adults, especially when it comes to matters of marriage and family. So if it has to do with the definition of marriage or divorce or same-sex parenting or transgender parenting or cohabitation, polygamy, adoption, whatever it is, we center that conversation on the child and insist that the child's rights and well-being are elevated above what adults want. And I tell people that means that I'm going to piss you off too. Oh, and reproductive technologies. That's a huge part of what we critique is reproductive technologies, which is really a marketplace of children. So that is what I do in my work life. But I also am raising 4 teenagers in Seattle. They've largely gone to public school, and we are not afraid. Our children are great. They're standing firm on their values. They can buck the crowd. They can push back against aggressive adults. And so everywhere that I go, whether it's to the local playground or on a national platform, everyone has always asked, how do you do it? How do you raise kids in such a hostile culture? And so finally, we just decided to put it in a book. My co-author, Stacey Manning, and I just came out with a book last month called Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City, Teaching Economic, Historical, and Biological Truth in a World of Lies. So it's just, how do you instill your worldview in your kids when everything is against you? So in summary, I'm very passionate about 2 things. When it comes to the cultural, legal, and technological changes happening out there, my message is don't touch the kids, leave the kids alone. And when it comes to the progressive worldview, my message is don't touch my kids, leave my kids alone. So that's it. Everything that I do and say and tweet and X really is just about how can you elevate the rights and well-being of children, leave them alone, and adults need to snap into child protection mode.
Amazing. I mean, it's very rare that with doing what I do, it's very rare that I come across 2 women who I actually see as role models. So thank you, both of you, for joining me, because I'm sure I've got a lot to learn from the both of you. So I wanna sort of kick off with a question to both of you. Rayla, I'll start with you. I want to know what the most concerning policy is to you right now, regarding the safety of children and obviously people pushing the wokeness onto children. I'm in the UK. I don't know exactly what policies you guys have got over there. So what's the current climate looking like, and what's concerning you?
The most concerning thing is the CRT, which I now call crazy racial trash, because that's exactly what it is. So when they're trying to push children, so what we're doing is they're literally segregating, and they're pushing discrimination and racist behavior on other children. So why is it okay for someone to tell a young white child that they're the oppressor and that they have wronged this other Black child? They have done nothing wrong. These children don't understand color when they're at this young age. That is brought on to them by adults and what they perceive and what they have been indoctrinated. They're not teaching real history. They're not teaching foundations. And when we go back to how it should be, when we trust in the Bible, and we used to say the Lord's Prayer in public schools, and we would stand up and say our the Pledge of Allegiance, it is under God. And when we talk about civics and our education and our children learning, we need to be bringing that back to God and teaching them, as beautiful souls as they are, that we are all equal in God's eyes. And there is no reason why what happened in the past is the past, and that was of their time. And once they're of the age, let's teach that to them. But right now, let's teach them how to be strong, how to actually read, write, and not cross things out and be like, oh, it's a mistake and I spelled it wrong, forget about it. They don't even teach them proper grammar. The worst thing that they could do right now is dumbing down of the system. And that is what we see going on in America. These children we used to be at the top. Now we are coming down, way down, almost at the bottom. And it is because of the leftist policies, with them trying to take away educational value. If a child is struggling, teachers used to go to that child. They used to do extra help, whatever they could do to make that child able to succeed. Right now, they're like, oh, well, they don't even discipline them. The teachers are afraid. They're also way too young to be teaching some of these age groups. They're indoctrinating them because of the woke colleges that they went to.
Yeah.
And our children are suffering. That is the biggest problem right now, is they are suffering because we have these Ivy League colleges pushing wrong, hateful indoctrination that's not even true fact. If we want to talk about true fact, we'll teach them about Booker T. Washington and how he told everybody that never to vote for a Democrat. We always see why. We'll teach them about Black history, real Black history, where we have, Blacks have done so much for this country and have risen. As we had Black Wall Street, and who destroyed that? Democrats. We had the plantations. We look at that. We freed slaves. Who wanted to stop that? Democrats. So when you're talking about the policies and everything that's going on, this is what they're trying to push on our children. We want our children just to be educated, to be able to pursue a career, whatever they want to do, and have the tools and abilities to do that. Does not matter what the color of their skin. They need to be taught. And if we're teaching our children, they will thrive, and we will get rid of racism instead of forcing it on our children. We love our country. I love this country. I was brought up to just be America's the best. We heal everybody. We do everything. And what you see right now is the policies that they put in place. And I'm completely awake and aware of what they've been doing, because they tried to. I'm class of 2000. They tried to do it with us, and we were like, absolutely not. We're not doing that.
And
That
I
was the
imagine a lot of
whole.
people don't like the fact that you're proud of your country, like especially over here in the UK. It's a completely different climate. Like I don't think I would really ever meet anyone who would be bold enough to say I'm proud to be British, because if you say that, you're a racist. We have a thing over here where if someone has the St George's flag outside the house or the Union Jack, you're a racist, you're a white supremacist. So I imagine with you being a black lady, people really don't like the fact that you say, do you know what, I love this country and I'm proud of it. Because I've seen a lot of videos where people get really pissed off with anyone who claims that they're proud of any country in the West at the moment.
They do. I get called, a traitor to my own race. I get called an Uncle Tom. And I'm like, well, if you actually knew the story of Uncle Tom, that's actually a compliment, because he helped free slaves. But you guys are so educated that you know that stuff. So, I am always going to be proud to be American. I love my country. I will die for my country, just like I will die for my children.
Yeah.
It's about standing up for what is right. And this country gave us the freedoms to practice, to preach, to do whatever we want in this country, because we are free. And those are rights given to us by God, and I'll make sure I protect those.
No, that's amazing. I just wanted to quickly revert back, just for the British viewers, the CRT. So this is a policy that is given to schools in America?
Yes. So it's a curriculum, and, it's critical race theory is what it's called.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've heard of this. Okay.
So we just shorten it down to the letter CRT, or I call it crazy racial trash. And now they want to put, diversity, equity, inclusion. And I just switched the letters up. Diversity, inclusion, equity. It spells die. That's what they want for our society.
Yeah.
So we've got to fight against this. I mean, they tell you exactly how much they hate you and how much they want to destroy you. And they're
100%.
going after your children.
100%. No, I completely agree. I think it's pretty similar over here. I don't know exactly how it works over here, if it's actually written down into curriculum or what. But the whole critical race theory, I think it's pretty similar over here. Katy, the same question really to you. What's the main thing that's concerning you right now with regards to our children in education, and how they're being indoctrinated?
Well, I wrote a Newsweek article earlier this year called How the GOP Can Become the Party of Children. And it really is outlining that there is no way that children are not under assault right now. It actually is almost every culture war issue that we are looking at today can be boiled down to violating the rights and well-being of children. So in my estimation, we're doing that on 4 primary rights of kids. Their right to life obviously is under assault in terms of the normalization of abortion and even normalization of infanticide in some of these bills where they're fighting to save babies born alive after an abortion. Also, the baby making industry, big fertility, is responsible for destroying more embryonic life than the baby taking industry. So children's right to life is under assault. Children's rights to their parents. Right. We talk a lot about parental rights, which is very, very important. But parents don't just have a right to their children. Children also have a right to their parents. And so that idea of children have a right to the 2 people responsible for their existence is under assault by every manifestation and promotion of modern family that we have today. It's also under assault in terms of a lot of the ways that we're communicating to kids about parents being the enemy. So all of that cultural messaging as well. Children have a right to innocence. They have a right to the protection of their mind. That is under assault when you're looking at all of the sex ed material, the outrageous library books that Rayla is fighting against. It's under assault when it comes to rampant porn use and the fact that we don't have any safeguards for kids that are accessing porn. And when the porn industry is required to do age verifications, they simply pull out of that state because they don't want age verifications for kids.
Yeah.
And then, of course, children have a right to their bodies, to their very own physical bodies, which is under attack when you're talking about the chemical and surgical mutilation of children's bodies and transgender treatments, whether you're talking about their bodily safety in terms of sex segregated locker rooms or sports or like bathrooms. And then children also have a right to fair play. Their bodies need sports to flourish. They have a right to sex segregated sports and to have fair competition. So it's like really every major culture war issue that you're facing today ultimately comes down to, are you respecting or are you violating the rights of children? And there really is no area of child rights, thriving, and well-being that is not currently under assault by what is largely this progressive push.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting what you say with parents being painted as the enemy. I actually read an article earlier this year. I believe it was The Guardian. I could be wrong, but basically over here in the UK, they put out a policy that if a child came forward and said that they felt like they were a different gender, that the school was required to tell the parents. And I was quite shocked to see this. And I thought, wow, like the news is actually reporting on something good. Like this is great news for kids and great news for parents. Until I read further into the article, and the whole article was basically tearing this apart and saying why it's dangerous. They had all these different quotes from teachers coming forward and saying you're putting the children in danger and you're putting the children at risk of being subject to transphobia, and that the kids might be then threatened by the parents. So it's like we have these policies in place where teachers are being told you're required to tell a parent if a child says that they want to be a different sex to what they are. But then there's a lot of teachers turning back and going, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm putting the child first and I'm going to keep it private because they've asked me to. So the teachers aren't even listening to the policy. So I guess, my question to you both is, where do parents stand in all of this? What can parents really do when it seems that the whole system is rigged against them and their own children are being turned against them?
Mm-hmm. Well, you fight like hell. You fight like, and you fight for every child. So again, I really believe that the parental rights movement is so important and so critical and so true, but it's insufficient. It is sufficient if you are raising your children in ways that protect their rights and thriving, but it's insufficient because we actually, as a just society, are supposed to be focused on protecting the most weak and the most vulnerable. So in my opinion, we have got to adopt this child protection framework for all children. We need to advocate on behalf of their natural right to life, to family, to an innocence, to an intact body. I mean, we have got to now robustly go out and not play defense, but play offense on behalf of children. So that's number one, is we need to get very serious about how these policies are harming children's mind, bodies, and their souls, honestly. And so we need to do that in the public policy space and unflinching. I mean, enough. Stop allowing these ridiculous accusations of being racist or homophobic or transphobic to stop you, because your desire for social acceptance should not be the price of children's rights and well-being. That's you've got to make that understanding.
I mean, I guess to play devil's advocate here for a second, because I completely agree with you. But what I can hear sort of, people I've worked with in the past saying is, well, if I do get called racist, transphobic or whatever, I could lose my job. And then if I lose my job, I don't have the money to look after my kids anyway. So, what would be your comeback to the people who say that?
Jesus says, be not afraid. That's intimidation, and that's completely illegal, because they are trying to do that here, and they've done it through a lot of states. In Massachusetts, they actually tell the teachers that they shouldn't tell the parents if a child is feeling, maybe they might be a different gender. You should keep that away from your parents, because is your parent an accepting parent? Will they listen to that? See, I'm the parent of that child. My kid, I gave birth to them. I created them. Me and my husband created them. They are my property until they are 18 years old and they're old enough to make their own decisions. So this is a violation of not only parents' rights, but it's a violation of the child. Now, if a child is struggling with something, you're a mandated reporter and you're now keeping some information information that's really important to me and the well-being of my child, and you're hiding that and you're trying to twist their brain in a way that will fit you, makes me think that you have some sick, twisted issue,
Yeah.
but you're also in violation of your contract and being a mandated reporter. So you should be reported. All of these teachers that are hiding information from the parents should all be reported for child endangerment. That's how you go after them. You got to flip it right back on them. You can't allow them to keep coming after you. They can call me every name in the book. That means I'm doing something right. Because if you're afraid and all you can do is come back and call me a name, it's your projection. It shows exactly who you are inside and that you have some sick, twisted agenda in your own brain in which you're trying to target children. You want to target? I'm an adult. Come at me. Don't come after my children.
Yeah. And I would say that the cost that society will level on you for rejecting what is really a progressive religion. I mean, why are they so zealous? Because they're worshiping, this is their God. And so, of course, they're going to come at it with that kind of religious zeal to excommunicate, which is really what you're doing when you fail to comply with the DEI or whatever it is. And I would say there is a cost. I think all of us, Rayla's experiences, we've experienced it. There is a cost to standing up there. And it might be your job. It's probably going to be some people in your friend circle. It might be that people like target you or target your kids or dox you or come after you. I mean, like we've all not we all, but I've experienced some of that. Rayla's experienced some of it. My co-author Stacy's experienced some of it. And what I would say is you probably need to, as my friend John Stonestreet says, develop a theology of getting fired. Like really figure out, what is it that I am unwilling to do? What is it? What is the line that I am unwilling to cross?
Yes.
Probably I think that line needs to be don't lie. At the very, very minimum, and that's the minimum, is don't lie. Don't force them to make you say something that is a lie. And right now, I think the areas where we are lying the most and where the lies are the most damaging has to do with kids. So take on the mantle of child protection. And if they lie, if you get fired because of a lie, I hope that you are the most beautiful person that does it. And you inspire massive amounts of courage on behalf of people that watch you sacrifice yourself for the sake of kids. I mean, there will be no social transformation until we really start to see adults prioritizing what kids need above what they want, even if it means keeping a job.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we really live in a time at the moment where we've almost become slaves to our employers. In the space that I'm in, people always use the argument of, people don't want to slave away for a husband and a family. And it's like, well, the hypocrisy in that is, but you're slaving away for an employer. And an employer sees you as nothing but a number, really and truly. You could have the best job in the world. It could pay you, I don't know, $1 million a year or, whatever the equivalent to that is over here. And you could absolutely love your job. But the truth is, your employer is only going to ever see you as a number, and you're replaceable in seconds. But in your home, as a wife and as a mother, that's not replaceable. You're never just going to be a number in that environment. And I think that it highlights that point, that, people's values seem to be really messed up at the moment and really sort of disorganized. And yeah, I completely agree. I think the only way to move forward is to stand up for kids before ourselves and realize that this is becoming a real problem. And it's only going to get worse unless we all individually take responsibility to do something to stop it. So for everyone listening, especially young women, which I know there's not many of you, but for the girls who do tune into me, please listen to what these ladies are saying, because it's a real problem. And I don't want to face it with my children. And if we can all do our best, hopefully you guys won't have to face it either. But I wanted to ask, Rayla, I read somewhere earlier that you've seen communism and socialism mixed into today's policies. Could you give, for the people who perhaps aren't aware of what this kind of stuff means, could you explain what you mean by that? So give a sort of, I know it's a bit of an ask, but to give a brief kind of summary of what is communism and socialism and where can we see it today?
Well, it's right there, right in front of you. I mean, at what point in a free nation, the United States of America, can the government come in and mandate you get a vaccination and your children get a vaccination? That's completely a violation of our constitutional rights. My body, my choice. Remember, the Democrats always said that. But when we also talk about, when you look at Obamacare and them forcing everybody across the country to get on Obamacare, which kicked people off of their already good plans or their state plans that they had and took them out of their away from their doctors. Again, the government is not my healthcare provider. The teachers union is not the parent to my child. We have these rights and we need to stand up and protect our rights. And when we see them trying to ban you for going into businesses for not wearing a face diaper, that's where it's like they will target you. And as parents, we do not co-parent with the government. We are the parents of our child. And when we look at the policies that they're putting down in place, and when they go in and they want to gentrify a neighborhood while you've got an apartment building that's falling apart with people who can barely make ends meet, then they're going to tear down a building right next to it, put in these luxury apartments that nobody in this community can afford because they want to gentrify the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
They want to get rid of cars. You see them already out there like, oh, by 2025, or 2035, we're going to have all electric cars. Bull crap. Same thing with coming after our gas ovens. They want to take away your voice, your right to choose. Why do they want to take away your right to choose? Because they want control, because they want you to be they don't want us to be people. They want us to be their servants.
Numbers.
Again. Yeah, exactly. And we look at it. And so many people are realizing, but then you got the sheeple, as we call them. They're like, well, what can we do? What can we do? We can't fight City Hall. Well, yes, you can, because so many of you don't get out there and vote. When you get up and you get out there and voice your opinions, you can make a difference. So it is all about us standing up and making that difference and putting our foot down. They're allowed to do whatever they want. It's not rules for thee and then for we. No, no, no. We have a constitution that is protected by our God-given rights, and parents and people in the United States need to remember that. We are a free nation. We make the decisions, and if we don't like the laws, we can kick you out and elect somebody that will represent our voices.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much, as I say again, the exact same over here. We've got buildings going up in areas. I personally live in quite a deprived area of London, and there's people out on the streets every night. My dad is he works for the public transport here in London, so he sees the streets at night, and we've got people struggling to get by. There's a real mess going on with violence on the streets in London at the moment. Just where I live, within the last 2 weeks, we've seen, I think the oldest one was about 22. The youngest was a 15-year-old girl stabbed to death. So we've got problems going on that aren't being addressed, but you can guarantee that there's a flashy new building 30 stories high going up that no one
and they're
can
bringing all the illegals in to house that and paying $2,000 a month when we have people that are out on the streets and our veterans are getting kicked out of their homes. So that's what we see happening. We are not, our borders are wide open. This is not a closed border. And every single state in this country is a border state because of what we see them happening. They want to replace us so they can bring in people that they can completely control. It's social engineering by the Democrats. And that is why we have to stand up and we have to say enough is enough. And we've got to put our foot down. Our veterans, our homeless that are out there struggling, our people that are losing their housing because they can't pay their bills because, they don't raise minimum wage unless it's in California. No offense, California. But around here, it's a struggle for people just to make ends meet. And we don't have food on the shelves. We're running out of milk. But yet you're going to have illegals come over here and give them everything. Brand new PlayStations, brand new Nikes, gift cards to go whatever they want. They destroy everything. They're not coming in here to be part of our nation. They're coming in here to take from our nation. And that is why so many people are fed up and so many people are fighting. They just found a mother and daughter on Mass and Cass. It's what we call Millennia Cass, which is basically it's a tent encampment where they just openly allow them to do drugs on probably about 2 miles of the city in Boston. And a poor mom, when her 2-year-old daughter, she said that she couldn't pay her car payment. She was living out of her car. They towed her car and she was found outside all doped up on drugs, holding the baby in an alleyway on Mass and Cass. And do you think the governor would actually stand up and do something? Democrat governor. She's like, "Ooh, this is terrible. We have an issue here. No, you created this issue, and now we're going to have to fix it. And the way to fix it, get them out."
Yeah, I mean the latest sort of ridiculous thing happening over here in London is our mayor has decided that he wants to impose a ultra low emission zone, which means that people, if they want to go to the shop, if they have a certain type of car, they have to pay £12.50 just to make that route. You have to pay £12.50 to drive through these ultra low emission zones. And where I live in particular, that means if I want to go to the supermarket, I'm lucky that my car doesn't come under this. I've got a fairly newish car, but a lot of people who I know have to pay £12.50 just to go to the shop. And it's more incentive to get people out of cars into public transport. And our mayor says this is because we've got children dying of asthma, when actually if you was to care about children dying of asthma, you would start with improving the quality of the London Underground, for example, because that is where, you can see real cases of people suffering. But no, we want to extend this ultra low emission zone and charge everyone £12.50 just for one journey. Because then, like you say, people can't afford things, people can't afford to drive, you get people out their cars, you get people into public transport, and it's all about control. So people really need to wake up to this. Yeah, exactly. And then people are divided, and it just amplifies it.
It's crazy. And you see what's going on in our public transportation system. Don't try to come out here in Massachusetts and ride it. It might catch on fire. You might have to jump into the ocean there. And or it drags people, they're caught in the door and you think the train would stop. No, some guy was decapitated, yes, on our public transportation. If they break down, we have Chinese trains that aren't even available. They don't have the capability to run on our tracks. They do not care the violence level that is on public transportation. Go to New York and ask somebody if they want to ride the T at night. Absolutely not. They're either going to get thrown onto the tracks or murdered anyway. It's just, this is what they want. They want people to be afraid. They want to have that complete control, and they're not cleaning up any of the systems. And again, it is what is happening with the open borders. We have 169, probably close to 200 terrorist cells that we have no idea where they are in this country. And what are they going to go after first? Public transportation. It's got the most people on it.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Just to bring the conversation back to woke policies surrounding children. I actually read in an article, Rayla, that you said 5th graders were being urged to perform sex acts. Could you expand on that? What is that you've actually seen?
Yeah, this is the books. So this is the books that they're putting in. So we're talking about the boys aren't all blue. It's perfectly normal. There's another one that's called Let's Talk About It, along with Gender Queer. Now, these are all geared towards kids ages 10 and older. How old's a 5th grader? Be 10 years old. So why are you putting these type of books that have them going to websites called kink.com, which is pornographic website, literally in the book, written in the book. So you have teachers that are going in there. And I actually just got a message from a parent in Worcester Public Schools that her 6th and 7th graders were in sex ed class, and another teacher who shares the classroom took a picture because the teacher had a dildo sitting on the desk to teach kids on, how we should use, what do they call it? A non-microwavable saran wrap, or how about a dental dam? Yeah, this is all the stuff that they are in their sex education that is supposed to be, you're not even supposed to be teaching. It's not a requirement in Massachusetts, but yet they are teaching it. For children
how old?
And they are actually it's starting at K through 12 is their sex education.
So what age is that roughly?
So kindergarten, right. Age 5 through senior in high school. But what they're doing in the kindergarten, they have a gender unicorn where has different parts on a unicorn. Again, they like to use comic book motif in order to bring these children in. So all of these books are comic book form. And it's like, oh, I'm reading a comic book. No, 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 you're not. And then you see what's in there. I mean, Genderqueer tells kids to taste their own vagina slime. Those are the exact words in the book. And then you have It's Perfectly Normal, which tells children how to use a dental dam on other parts of your body and to experiment with multiple partners, because oral sex is not really sex if it's not penetration. And if you have anal sex, it's not penetration through the vagina, so it's not sex. So you should try it with multiple people and use all of these objects and these are in the books. And then when you look at It's Perfectly Normal, you open the thing up, it's got 5-year-olds with opposite body parts, completely naked, and they're like, it's normal if you feel different from what your body is. No, who would write this? Who would put it in a book? Who would publish it and put it in front of children unless you have something wrong with your mind? I went out and exposed it all. They said it wasn't there. Bam, it was as soon as I walked in the children's department, big display of all these inappropriate books. I just started flipping through. And at one point, we had to walk out of the library because we were shaking. That's how disgusted we were.
I mean, I have no doubt that there is probably, I haven't done the investigating myself, but you're actually prompting me to now go out and have a look. I have no doubt that there's probably something similar, happening here in the UK, because I've seen a few stories here and there of, parents complaining that their children have seen stuff that they really shouldn't have. But I didn't quite know that it was to the explicit level that you're telling me it is. And that's absolutely disgusting and shocking. So,
Yep.
Katy, I want you to tell me about raising conservative children in a woke society. What can we do about this? Because everything I'm hearing is very doom and gloom. It's the reality. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We have to address the facts. It is doom and gloom, and it's a mess.
Yep.
So
yeah, everything about the progressive worldview is death leads to death.
Yeah.
Whether it's, believing that you can terminate the life of your child before or, maybe after birth, sterilizing children, leads to death, promoting relationship statuses that are non-procreative, that don't lead to new life. I mean, everything that the left aspires to. I mean, really, even things like COVID policy, it was so anti-child.
Yes.
I mean, kids are going to spend, will they ever recover from the educational deficit of closing schools? I mean, we have massive
even with the masks, they're not learning how to interact with each other because they're not being able to read facial expressions.
Yep. That's exactly right. Children were developmentally hindered because we cut them off from one of the main ways that they learn in early childhood.
Yeah.
I mean, really everything that the left is promoting, and what is it? Like, why is that? I would argue that on the Christian sort of conservative side of things, those go together. The Christian worldview is the foundation for these principles of conservatism that have led to a thriving, prosperous nation and societies, right? They set them up towards human flourishing. And all of the progressive worldviews set them up towards human destruction, really. And so we are up against incredible odds, and we don't sugarcoat that at all. It is a worldview. It is a religious-like presupposition that is fighting to evangelize and disciple your children. But I will also say this. Parents have faced worse. We kind of had this little golden time in America, at least from maybe the 40s until the 80s or 90s, where there was some agreement about human dignity and about rights and about child protection. We're not in that world anymore. And Christians, from the first century Christians that were born into a world of absolute child victimization in every way you could victimize children, to people that have lived under communist regimes, to people that are raising their kids in China right now. Christians have always had to do this. We have always had to fight against the culture, and we can. So not only that, but I would say that we actually could see a massive transformation, and I think we already are, in terms of raising up the next generation. If you look at, for example, rates of boys in high school age boys, so like 14 to 18-year-old boys are vastly more conservative than they ever have been, and more seriously conservative than previous generations, right?
Yeah.
So we have more boys who are more conservative now. And I think, I mean, it's a different story for girls, right? Girls have been a little more captivated, largely because of social media influence. They are more
Yep.
susceptible to peer pressure and influence, whether it's online or in their own world. So we've got some work to do with girls, but boys are getting the message in a lot of ways. And I think it's because there has been an awakening among parents that actually we can do this. We can transmit our values to our children. We need to do that. So that's what we do in the book is we say, here's the conservative principles that are under attack right now that you need to be very deliberate about instilling in your kids. And then we sort of give an age appropriate framework on exactly how to teach those principles to your kids in elementary school, which is like, we say 2 to 10 or 11, right? That first developmental phase, that sponge phase where they just unquestioningly accept whatever's given to them. Then you get to those middle school years where it's like ages 11 to 13 or 14. And that is where you are going to introduce them to the woke distortions of those conservative principles. And then they get to high school, ages like 14 to 18. And honestly, the worldview training is mostly done at that point. You've already taught them the true and the beautiful. You have introduced them and equipped them and made them experts on the woke distortions. And then in high school, your job is to stay emotionally close to them. Your job is to move into the role of consultant where you are hyper connected. You still know more about these things than they do. You're absolutely available when they text you and say, hey, quick, send me those stats on, how abortion rates dropped by blah, 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 blah. I mean, like you're still like facilitating and supporting them, but they're now standing on their own. So you can absolutely do this. And not only can you do it, but this crazy culture actually serves as a bit of a foil for the Christian conservative worldview. I mean, when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s, in middle school and high school, I wasn't a Christian. I was not a conservative. But I will say that like it kind of looked like the Christians were backwards and out of touch with reality, and school and science and the world. That's where, you had opportunity and you could ask questions and it was exciting and wonderful. Like, no, not anymore. Not anymore. Like now my kids are in a world where they're looking at the choices of their friends in school. They're hearing the ideas from their teachers. They're looking at the fallout all around them in society of these terrible ideas. And all they see is death and destruction and depression. And so actually we are at a place where the best ideas are going to be much more visible than they ever have been before. And we just need to do the work of making sure that we train our children to think about these issues well. And if you do, A, they will not be able to be captured. And B, we actually might be able to change the direction of society.
Comes back to common sense. Teach your kids common sense and do it right from the start. I mean, my kids are firecrackers. They are whipped. They are quick to, make a comeback or something. But that's the society that we've had to grow in. And COVID did a number on a lot of people. I didn't stop going to the stores. I didn't stop bringing my kids off. We didn't wear masks. And if we got called out in a store, they whip out their incredible mask and put it over their eyes and be like, hey, look, I'm wearing my mask. So that's the stuff that it's like, you got to push back. Because again, we have the freedoms to do what we want to do in this country, and people need to stand up and exercise their rights and their voices. And when I look at it, when you take everything that's happening now, the attack on our men, the attack on our children, the attack on society, we've already been through that in the Black community. They already tried to, kill all the Black people many, many a times. We've seen it. So when we saw COVID, we're like, nope, we're not going to be your Tuskegee Airmen project. When we saw them putting on the face diapers, like, nope, we'll just pull our kids out. That was the hugest community that pulled their kids out and were able to homeschool and educate our children. And it all brought it back to faith because God is the strongest. We saw what the government came and did when they told that the women, all the Black women, that their men were no good and tried to put them all in jail. Now look what they're doing. They're coming just after everybody else, telling you that your men are no good, that your men should be girls, and that, that they should be involved in all of the girl sports because they can't possibly be men. No, it is attack on our men. It is attack on the family. It is attack on the nuclear family. We've seen it before, and now everybody else is just opening up their eyes because it's coming after you. So that's where we stand united, and we stand up strong, and we just push back, and we go out there with fire because they are afraid of us, and they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I mean, Katy, you mentioned that time period of, say, sort of the 40s to the 80s. I often find it quite interesting when I talk to my dad. My dad was born in 1955, so I think he's 67 or 68 now. So he's lived through those decades where, society has really, really changed. And, I sort of ask him, like, how did we get to this point? Because, my parents probably don't call themselves conservative, but they are, like, their views and everything. I'm like, yeah, they're not really politically active or anything. They're conservative, but they don't know it. To them, it's just, like you say, Rayla, common sense. So,
Right.
I often ask him, how did we get to this point? Because, I have the same views as my family and my parents. And I'm like, but everyone around me and everyone my age seems to be completely the other way. And something my dad mentioned to me was over here, especially from sort of the 90s to the end of 2010, I'd say, soaps were really popular. So like soap operas. And we've got the really popular ones are EastEnders, Coronation Street, and Emmerdale. They're on every weeknight, and mums love them. I'm scarred by the theme tunes of these soap operas from how often I heard them in my household growing up. But, when you look at how these soaps have changed over the last few decades, I guess, Katy, it's what you were saying about the modern manifestation of family, and Rayla, as you mentioned, the destruction of the nuclear family unit. Now, there's no story unless you've got at least one gay couple on there. You've got someone who's co-parenting. There's no one on these soaps anymore that have been married for 30 years and the family's still intact. And I said, how did this happen? Because a lot of people argue, well, the soaps reflect society. I would actually argue it's the other way around. The soaps put their characters in their positions, and then society sees that and goes, oh, so this is more acceptable now. And then society tends to reflect what they see. And I just thought that this pattern was really, really interesting. And my dad said it as well, there's no story unless someone's having it off with someone else, as he puts it. Which I get, but I think the problem is that, I hate to say it, and Rayla, I think you mentioned on this, we do have an IQ crisis. People are being given participation awards for things. Everyone's being told that they're competent enough to do stuff when the truth is that they're not. So I think we're playing a dangerous game with trusting that people have the intelligence or awareness to be able to discern things from like a soap opera to reality. How can we change those kind of things? Because the media, at least to me, seems like it's a bit of a lost cause. Is it a case of being able to change that, or is it more a case of just arming our children in such a way that they're not affected by that?
Well, to your point, I am on the advisory board for Jordan Peterson's new project, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship.
Okay.
And we have a research paper that is coming out, I think, next week, where we sort of talk about how did we get to where we are and how do we undo where we are. And one of the huge ways that we have arrived at the place that we are is these cultural changes, these cultural mantras, things like kids don't need moms and dads. They just need two parents. Love makes a family. But beyond kind of those talking points, we've actually had for decades a drastic shift in our entertainment, right? And the principle that we talk about both in our Raising Conservative Kids book, but also in my paper for ARC, is this idea that you become what you behold. And this is true no matter what, right? I can see it in my daughter when she's flipping through Instagram. And if she is like watching lots of dessert reels, she'll be like, Mom, I need you to go get me some chocolate chips and blah, blah, blah. But then she'll switch over to like some of the healthy foods. And she's like, no, I need you to get me some chia seeds. And then she starts like baking all these really healthy things. Like, you become what you behold. What you watch, what you look at is going to shape you and transform you. So that has absolutely happened with things. You guys have soaps, we have sitcoms. We've been doing that for decades. Very, very hard pressed to find any healthy, married, faithful couple where the dad is not an absolute buffoon in those sitcoms. I mean, going back from the 80s, it's always the mom who solves the problem.
Yeah.
She's the one that's knowledgeable. And now we have normalized all kinds of divorce, same-sex parenting, single motherhood by choice, that kind of thing in all of these shows. And if there is a married couple, a lot of the time it's awful. But that's not true, right? So we have to, number one, well, first of all, on the individual level, we will never be able to have children who grow up to be responsible adults, who are able to bear the burden for the needs of their children, if they do not have adults in their own home who is modeling that. The place where you become what you behold is the most powerful in the theater of child rearing. And so when we have destroyed these families, we have made it immeasurably harder for kids to go out and form and maintain their own healthy relationships. But also, you become what you behold is so critical in the cultural imagination. And we need, if we are going to restore society, we need people, artists, novelists, filmmakers, even TikTokers and Instagrammers to let people behold a beautiful family life. They need to be able to behold strong men and women who are not constantly critical, not trying to be the boss girl, not trying to like override every single thing that their husband does. Dare I say it, like submitting and following his leadership, right? Like you need to be able to behold that kind of cooperation in the home. You need to behold faithfulness. You need to behold parents who are working out problems, treating one another as equals, but not interchangeable in the relationship. So we are in deep shit, honestly, when it comes to where we are culturally. And we have got to start showing the next generation. We need to give them beautiful things to behold. Otherwise, they will never become the kind of people that can mend society.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting as well that something I've noticed is that in recent years, when people get married, I've spoke to a couple of couples on this. They take out the vow of the woman to vow that she will, is it trust and obey?
Mhm.
Yeah.
The obey
Yeah.
vow. People really have a
Just
problem
obey.
with that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that just shocks me because I'm like, why have we painted it in such a way that your husband is now this tyrannical leader who you
Right.
have to like bow down and pray to? It's like,
Yeah.
no, obey doesn't have to mean that. It can, it can be something beautiful, but we've completely changed the narrative. And it just shocked me how many people I personally know who are married who took that out of their vows. And I think, again, how
Then
did
those
we
aren't
get
real
here?
vows.
Yeah.
We've neutered and demonized men to such a degree that now women will see him as the enemy. And really, that's what, Rayla was talking about. Really what critical race theory is it's an extension of critical theory. And there's all kinds of critical theories, right? You can have critical feminist theory and critical race theory. The original critical theory was a Marxism, which was a class struggle, but all of it really is just dividing people into groups of oppressors and oppressed. And I would say that the original critical theory that took hold in America was critical feminist theory. And that is seeing men as the enemy and men as oppressors and men as dominators and men as, framing every man that opens the door for a woman as a chauvinist. And so unfortunately, that critical theory has shaped an entire generation of women. And you can see it in the way that they approach marriage largely. And you can see it in the way men approach marriage too, because they are now much more highly skeptical of marriage because they are so often demonized.
Yeah. And what's really confusing to me, and I'm actually going to be discussing it, obviously Pearl's in Miami, so I'm going to be hosting the live show this week. I'm going to be talking on the topic of promiscuity, because that's something that I've really seen a shift. I feel like in a time of, say, the 50s and 60s, that's when, things first sort of started to become normalized. You had people like Marilyn Monroe take center stage. And I did a video on this when I started out, talking about how, Marilyn Monroe, yes, she was this beautiful woman, and I'm sure loads of people wanted to emulate that. But we've now got into a time where women no longer understand what value is. So I often use the sort of analogy of, value is determined by scarcity. And if you got it all out on your Instagram, or you've got an OnlyFans or whatever, you're essentially, if you was a restaurant, you would be McDonald's because it's cheap and everyone can go there, right? Whereas if not everyone had access to it, you'd be a Michelin star restaurant, right? And they understand that, you know, when I talk to these girls, they understand that principle. Then when I say now apply it to your sexual value, the understanding, I think it's willful ignorance. I really don't want to accept that it's willful ignorance because I want to hope that they can change. But do you know what? I think I have to surrender to certain things. I think it is willful ignorance. And they don't get it. They don't understand. And it's this whole idea of if you've got it, flaunt it. And I don't think people are really understanding the repercussions of promiscuity, because we're talking about the rights of children, right? What happens if people are more promiscuous? People are having more sex. What's going to happen if people are having more sex? People are making more babies. And
Right.
then we get into the conversation of what happens when these women are now getting pregnant with people they don't want to get pregnant with.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, we come into the whole abortion conversation. So I just want to get your guys' sort of individual thoughts on that whole thing, you know, promiscuity, and then that often leading to more abortions. Rayla, I'm going to come to you first on this one.
Oh, that's great, because Hollywood has created a bunch of whores, and so has the music industry. When you look at all the twerking videos and, you know, barely wearing any clothing, and we had a time, and so I find it funny because I look at some of the outfits that are like 2.0 of what we had in the 90s
Yeah.
and early 2000s with the crop tops and the baggy jeans, but now it's like it's barely a bra strap.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a notch. It's a badge of honor that I've slept with this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And you're just like, you're a whore. And they look at you and you're like, that's disgusting. Men should want you for your brain over your body first. Having a great body is fantastic, but you don't need to be advertising it out to the world. And that is a major thing that we see when we look at Hollywood and we look at all of our influencers. They're out there. It's all about how big your boobs can be, how big your butt can be, you know, Botox in your lips, all this fake. It's a fake thing. It's like a hyper. I don't even know what you did to Barbie, but you ruined her because, you know, it used to be Barbie was always classy and, you know, she always had these great outfits and it was like the picture perfect. And it didn't matter if it was the black Barbie or the white Barbie. Everybody wanted to be Barbie. She was fantastic. But now it's like everybody thinks that being a whore or going out there and acting like a slut, that's attractive and it's going to give you clout and you're going to get more followers. And then the one guy is like, ew, gross, you're nasty. And they're like, oh my God.
He's a misogynist.
Yeah, and you see it. And then we have the TikTok deaths and the YouTube deaths because they can't take rejection because they pump themselves up with something that they've let society and Hollywood and these big celebrities that have millions of dollars that they can put all this stuff into their body think that that's the norm. That is not the norm. The average everyday man does not want that. The average everyday woman does not want to be labeled that. I don't want to see twerk videos every single where I go or see kids twerking in school. I don't even know how to twerk. I'm like, I tried to do the little side thingy and I pulled a hip. So it's like when you look at what is happening here, it brings back to people looking at you go, that's trashy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be looked as trashy. Like, it's okay. I listen to rap music. I listen to everything. And, you know, I dress where people would be like, oh my gosh, that's a little provocative. And I just have a good shape. I'm adult and I like Calvin Klein dresses that are a little more tightly fitted. But I'm not out there like boobs hanging out, butt hanging out, and wearing crop tops and shaking my ass all over the place. That is disgusting. So what we need to be instilling on our women is the value of your body. You have a gift. God has given you a gift. Do not abuse this gift because that is what we see. And then you see the sex trafficking. You see them just feel like there's nothing left that they can do with themselves because they have deemed themselves unworthy of any type of real love, real affection because of the way that they've been out there acting. Instead of respecting your body, respecting yourself, that is the main thing that I teach my children. Like, we know we're beautiful. My kids are gorgeous. I'm in trouble with them, but they know that you respect your body, you respect yourself, and you want a man to love you for your brain, not for your body. And these girls out there shaking it all over the place, it's very disgusting, and they're putting themselves in danger.
Yeah.
And I tell my kids, you do not want to be that one where all of a sudden you're walking down the street and someone snatches you up because of the way you're wearing your clothes. And that's what we've got to get back to, is women need to respect themselves, and we need to love ourselves. We bring men and other women into the world. Only us. We can do that. So let's look at ourselves as that hierarchy, because we are the ones that bring life into the world. Without a woman's womb, that baby's not coming through. And that is another thing when you look at these kids and the Democrats and the way they push that abortion is like candy. Oh, you can just get one here, and there. Oh, go into the little vending machine and pop out a plan B. Instead of teaching these young girls to respect their body and to keep it as a treasure for that man that you love, and you're going to go and spend the rest of your life and have a beautiful family and have as many kids as you want. But you're going to do it the right way, and to not be using, as they call it, reproductive health, because it's not reproductive health. You're actually murdering what you're reproducing. But they use that as, well, you can just get an abortion. You can just get an abortion. Not telling the kids the trauma and the effect that it can have mentally on these children. We cannot just allow our girls to go around being everyday whores. We need to educate them, and they need to be respecting themselves. That's what I instill in all of the children that I work with.
Well, yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly right. I tell my daughters, men value what they work for, and they work for what they value. Okay. And that's just how men
I'm stealing that. Thanks.
Yeah. And so, like, if he is trying to offer you, if he's treating you, if he's expecting sex from you after like 2 dates or something, he doesn't value you. Okay. So you can just, if he's not working for it, he doesn't value you. But if he values you, he will do anything for you. I don't think women understand the power that they have in the sexual marketplace. And even though it's a bit crude to state it like this, Christine, you're exactly right. Sex is in many ways a commodity, right? There are people that are supplying and there are people that are demanding. Typically, women throughout history have controlled the supply side. The demand has always been pretty high from men for sex. But the difference is it used to be very scarce, right? Because women kept the demand, like the supply, very, very small.
Yeah.
And the price that they would exact for sex was lifelong commitment in front of all of our family and friends.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So typically it was this precious commodity that women got to decide when that they would dole out. Birth control changed that, right? Birth control was the big shock to the sexual marketplace. We're still trying to grapple with the real impact that had on the way that men and women both approach sex. But what birth control did is it dropped the price of sex. Women now said, okay, there's less risks to me having sex, right? I'm probably not going to be shackled with an unplanned pregnancy if I have sex. And so they were offering sex at a cheaper price. And Mark Regnerus has done the best work on this. He wrote a book called Cheap Sex that sort of explains this marketplace and all the factors that went into it. But the problem is that when you make sex cheap, women also become cheap, right? And now we're seeing this place where the price of sex has dropped so low that men don't even need women to get it. Right. They just use porn instead. Or now you've got AI girlfriends that are being developed, and you've got sex dolls and whatever. Like, women are actually so cheap that they're not even necessary anymore. Now, that's awful for everybody involved. It's awful for men, because men do not do well. It is not good for man to be alone. And we see these men who are not just single, but sexless.
Yeah.
I mean, we right now have the highest number of male virgins, men that don't have any sexual contact. And I mean, I'm a Christian and I'm a conservative and I love sex in its proper place. But when young men have no interest in sex, you actually have a human crisis. There has never been a time in history where young men have not been interested in sex. But that world is arriving at us today because we have actually dehumanized men in the way that we have approached sex and offered them sex. This is obviously very bad for women, because of our So oxytocin is the bonding chemical, the chemical that is released through skin-to-skin contact. You see it most prominently in mothers and babies breastfeeding. It creates this incredible, fierce bond. But oxytocin is also released during sex, really during any skin-to-skin contact. But for women, our higher levels of estrogen will heighten the impact of oxytocin. And therefore, after sex, we automatically feel more bonded. After sex, women go, oh, I belong to him. He belongs to me. We're going to be together forever. I can trust him. Like, that is chemically what your body is saying to you. But his testosterone dampens that effect in a lot of ways. So after sex, you're thinking, we're going to be together forever. And he's thinking, I wonder if there's any pastrami in the fridge, right? Like, there's two different responses to that. And so the challenge is that women bond through sex, whether or not that man is committed to you. And now you see women who have repeated hookups actually having very seriously damaged psyches when it comes to their ability to bond and trust in the future, because it's as if they have short-circuited the bonding mechanism that by design is supposed to be aligned with one person that never leaves them. And so we see 6 times higher rates of suicidal ideation in girls that are not virgins, that are participating in hookups. So we've really lied to women about sex. You know, we've told them that you will be liberated if you are participating in easy hookups. I mean, we've said that marriage is oppressive, that marriage is slavery, but the truth is
the
that
Marxist dream.
Yeah, by the numbers, Rayla and I are having better sex, more sex, and we are happier sexually than all of the women that are liberal, single, and participating in hookups. I mean, if you want great sex, get married, be conservative, and be a woman, and be highly religious. I mean, those are actually the factors that lead to, and be in your 40s to 50s. Like, that's the sweet spot for great sex. So we're like literally lying to women about who they are and their bodies and all of that. And of course, as it always is in the sexual revolution, children will be the ultimate and the required sacrifice. That's what happens when you make sex God. Children are the sacrifice.
And, you know, what happens then when children are the sacrifice? I mean, obviously then, as I said, you know, we have a massive increase in the number of abortions that are happening. You know, I personally have a pretty similar stance to you both, but I just want to ask you both, you know, what is your current stance on abortion, and what do you think needs to change, if anything, or are we at a perfect level at the moment?
I do not stand by abortion at all. Margaret Sanger wanted to exterminate the Black race. I sit there, and anytime there's that abortion topic, I look straight at them and I go, so why would I support the murder of more Black babies? I don't understand that. For me, it's a complete no-no. If you're teaching children how to respect their bodies, and that if you have an oops or whatever, that is a gift from God. Yeah. We do not terminate that baby. That is God's creation, and we will do anything and everything that we possibly can to make sure that that baby is happy and healthy and loved. So when I look at these people out there pushing abortion in the areas and where these abortion clinics are, I'm like, why you want to keep murdering Black people? I don't understand what your problem is. And then you're going to tell white people that they're racist if they don't murder Black people. This is a problem. And when you put it like that, people are just like, oh, yeah.
I had the same thing, actually. The first time I hosted Pearl's live show, I decided to talk about Margaret Sanger because I recently learned about this. I recently learned about Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood and where abortion and everything came from. And it was a reaction video. I really almost started crying hearing it. Yeah. And then I almost started laughing because it's almost hysterical how people will go out and advocate for this stuff and have no idea what they're actually saying, because it's the same people who scream, you know, woke politics and we're inclusive and, you know, Black Lives Matter. And it's like, but it was, hang on a minute, wait, what? How can you be Black Lives Matter and pro-abortion when it was literally invented to get rid of Black people? And I am actually really proud of myself because I sat on this panel as actually the only white person, and I read the quotes from Margaret Sanger, and surprisingly, well, not really surprisingly, like me, no one on the panel had heard this before. And I asked them all, you know, do you know where abortion and things like Planned Parenthood, do you know where that came from? And they all said, well, you know, feminists fought for our freedom and all of this. I said, actually, and then I read the quotes from Margaret Sanger, and I think they've recently removed her from the Planned Parenthood website, haven't they? They've sort of denied any relationship to her.
They're starting to distance themselves. There's been a few branches that have come out and acknowledged it, but most of them is just kind of quietly pushing it away.
Well, look, we definitely need to keep talking about it, because people need to know the real genesis of this stuff and what it's really about. I often talk about the fact that someone like Margaret Sanger is probably down there looking up going, yes, because people still have no idea. And you know what? Her plan is working. What she wanted is happening in real time. And we need to put a stop to that. We can only do that by talking about it, as uncomfortable as it is. I was really nervous during that panel, and I was literally I was like shaking whilst holding the paper. I was like, I'm going to get so cancelled for this. But I'm so glad that I said it, because that's 6 more people now that know the true nature of this stuff.
It's liberating.
It is liberating, because then you just feel so much more in the know, and especially if you realize how bewildered you was, because at one point I also thought that the suffragettes were just women who wanted equality, and they weren't what they are, which is
Margaret Sanger she was a we know her for abortion, but really her big passion was eugenics.
Yes,
right? The eugenics movement in the 1920s, and obviously what goes along with eugenics is the elimination of the Black race. And, we are murdering all of these Black children. I mean, the most dangerous place a Black child can be is in a womb in New York. I mean, like, those babies are the most at the highest risk of being aborted.
Yeah.
What we've done to the overall Black population. I mean, most Western countries right now are facing a demographic crisis. We are way below replacement rate.
Yeah.
There are a lot of countries that probably won't pull out of it. Japan, Korea are probably going to go extinct. But we're seeing it in all Western countries. The Black population in the United States has a very low reproduction rate. They may not recover. And so what abortion has done is abortion actually has plummeted them below replacement levels to a point where it would almost be a demographic miracle if they continue to exist as a population in our country. I mean, like, do you understand? It is
11.7%.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
It's dropped. It used to be 13. No, it's dropped. Now that's the concern. And it's probably lower than that.
Yeah. So from a children's rights perspective, we talk about all kinds of issues at Them Before Us. We talk about IVF and surrogacy and same-sex parenting and no-fault divorce and the definition of marriage and adoption. And there really is one mantra, one guiding principle that is sort of overarching over all of them. And that is, adults should sacrifice for kids. Don't make kids sacrifice for adults. You can really simplify all of those different issues by simply asking, who is going to do the hard thing? Will it be the children, or will it be the adults? And so when you're looking at issues of abortion, you are talking about, for example, someone in an unplanned pregnancy. Okay, so in that situation, someone is going to sacrifice. Will it be the adults who reorient their lives around this new life? Or will it be the child who dies?
Yeah.
Someone is going to sacrifice. In the children's rights world, it is the adults who sacrifice for the child, not the child sacrificing for the adults. You can take that into every marriage and family issue. There is a struggling couple. My husband is a pastor. When I am not doing children's rights activism, we are doing marriage counseling. Like, marriage is hard. Marriages struggle. At some point, every marriage is going to face challenges. In that situation, who is going to do the hard thing? Is it going to be the adults who figure out the marriage counseling, kick the porn addiction, deal with, all of the childhood baggage, work through the financial issues, learn better communication skills? Is it going to be the adults who do the hard thing? Or is it going to be the kids who do the hard thing by living in 2 different homes with split lives and split personalities as a result?
Yeah.
What about the person that's struggling with same-sex attraction, that desperately wants to be a mother or father, who would probably be a great mother and father? Are they going to do the hard thing by forming their family in a way so the child is loved and known by both mother and father every day? Or is it going to be the child who loses their mother and father and deals with all the identity issues and mother or father hunger and instability that goes along with being raised in a same-sex headed household? Who is going to do the hard thing? And in a just society, adults do the hard thing. In an unjust society, children lose their rights and their well-being is sacrificed so adults can live as they please. In the topic of abortion, in 100% of cases, it is always asking the child to do the hard thing on behalf of adults. And so in a children's rights world, it is always a no-go, no to
Yeah.
abortion.
No, and I completely agree that that should be how we are orientating our societies. It should be that the adults are the ones sacrificing themselves before the children. But unfortunately, as we can all agree and see from the numbers, that's not the case, and children are being sacrificed at a ridiculous rate on a daily basis. And I want to use this topic to segue into the final topic of today, which is adoption. So I know that Powell often suggests as a remedy for abortion, you can always adopt. If you really aren't willing to look after that child for yourself, you can always adopt. I have a bit of from personal experience, I have a bit of a split view on this, because I do agree, if you're really not going to look after the child, then yes, you should absolutely adopt instead of abort. However, I just think that general narrative then encourages parents almost to have these unplanned pregnancies, and then when that happens, you've got loads of kids going up for adoption. And the truth is, over here in the UK, I think on average about 200 to 250,000 kids get put into care each year. Of that number, I think it's about 2,000 actually get adopted. So yeah, I just want to quickly ask you both, what your individual views are on adoption. Rayla, I'll come to you first.
I definitely support adoption. I'm a major supporter of adoption. And I actually see a lot of the kids that are born in terrible situations with a family and they get taken away. And then we have families that are out there struggling to have a baby, and they can't adopt this child that they've had since they were 2 weeks old or, 2 months old. And they've had them now for years because of all of the regulations that they put in place, where this family has taken in a child that I would say is rightfully theirs. That's all this child knows, and they have grown up in a beautiful, loving home. I definitely think that we should have more children that are able to get adopted a lot faster, but it comes down to money, and that's what makes me sick. Is the government puts in all sorts of regulations and they put a price tag on a child's head instead of looking at the circumstances for the child, especially when you have a family that desperately. I had a friend, she was blessed to have her miracle baby after going through all sorts of different IV, all sorts of tests and having, trying to get pregnant in the incubator way and then trying to do it the regular way. And she was just like, she gave up. And at that point was when she got pregnant. But she was on a waiting list forever for just to adopt a child that she had been taking care of. She had that child in their custody. She was taking care of this baby since he was 6 months old, born addicted.
Wow.
And after she got pregnant and was carrying, they took that baby away. Well, you have your own now. We're going to put this one in a house that can house this child and that can have more focus on the ripped right from her arms. And when I see that happening throughout a lot of kids that are in state custody, it's like you have a bunch of people that don't want to have the abortion, but they're hooked on drugs. They have a baby, they give it up, and then the state uses that child as leverage and as money in order to get money from these parents who desperately want a child instead of looking out for the benefit of the child and putting them in a lovely home. We've got a lot of kids that have been murdered in foster care here in Massachusetts because they are not paying attention to what is best for the child. And when it comes to family too, they will skip right over family and go to somebody that they don't even know anything about, like, oh, we're going to put them with this person.
Yeah.
And you have these parents and you hear the stories and the struggles and how many $10,000 just to adopt a child. And I'm like, yeah, oh yeah. And that's why you have a lot of people that will go overseas and do it that way and adopt children overseas. And I'm like, you need to be adopting American kids.
Yeah.
Our kids need to be saved. So I am 100% a supporter of adoption. One of my friends actually has 4 kids of his own, 3 adopted.
Wow.
And he's working on adopting another one. And, they're trying to say, you can't adopt her unless you adopt her brother and the cousin, which is technically the uncle because it's the grandfather's baby and his son is the oh my gosh. You'd be like, what? Yeah, the grandfather and the son both had babies at the same time. And now they want him to adopt all three of the kids when he only was adopted. He had the little girl from the start. Now they're like, well, you got to take the rest of them too. And
And I imagine they've all got a price tag as well.
They do, and they've all been in different homes because they've been separated. So he's had this little girl, she's 4 years old now. He's had her since she's 2 weeks. And now he is, over the past year, he's gotten the other two. But they are damaged goods because they weren't taken away right away. And some of them have a lot of trauma and stuff. Those are children that need to be singly into one single family, adopted with one mom and dad that can actually focus on this child because they're going to need a lot of issues to get over that trauma. So when I look at the adoption system, it is broken, it is flawed, and it is harming those who cannot have children naturally or are striving to grow their family just because they're that type of people.
Yeah.
You know, they love to have an army of kids.
And people don't talk about the fact that these people exist, especially in the red pill space. A lot of people that Pearl talks to, I often see them say things like, you know, with the argument against single mothers, they say, well, you know, a guy doesn't want to raise someone else's kids. And, you know, I get what they're saying, but it almost comes off in bad taste because when I hear that, I think, hang on a minute. When I asked my dad, why did you guys adopt me? Their answer, my mum couldn't have children, so that's why they chose to adopt, because she has Turner syndrome, which is like a genetic disorder that means she can't have children.
Right.
And his answer has always been to me, because we wanted to give someone a chance. And it's like, there's absolutely men out there that are willing to raise children that are not their own. And I definitely think that's a stigma that we need to break down. The idea that these families don't exist. I mean, look at Pearl's family. I know, Katy, you spoke with Pearl about this. You know, her parents adopted kids, like, just because these kids needed a family. And there's absolutely wonderful people out there who are willing to do this. So we definitely need to destroy the stigma that, you know, people don't want to raise kids that are not their own. But Katy, I know you've done a fair bit on adoption. What's your stance?
Well, I don't know how much time we have, but I would love to hear a little bit from you, Christine. You were adopted as an infant.
Yeah. So my story is I was a product of a one-night stand, as far as I'm aware. Originally, I think there was a bit of a wonder who my father was. I think for context, my biological mother has borderline personality disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder. She's been very unwell her whole life. I don't really know much about her past, but I know that she's really unwell. So she had a boyfriend at the time, and I think she had a one-night stand with this boyfriend's friend. So they didn't know if my father was the boyfriend or the boyfriend's friend. Either way, a DNA test was done once social services got involved, because they had to know who the dad was. And it turned out to be the friend. But the reason I was put up for adoption was because, unfortunately, she developed religious paranoia when she was pregnant with me. And I actually only came to Christianity recently because I grew up being very afraid of it, because my biological mother actually believed I was the spawn of Satan. So her whole pregnancy, she wouldn't touch her belly because she believed if she did that she would get some kind of evil spirits transferred onto her. She was actually sectioned 3 times when she was pregnant with me. One of the times is because she cleared out all of the furniture from our apartment, put it in the middle of the street and set it alight. And she was doing some kind of cleansing ritual because she believed she was about to birth the Antichrist. And she would refer to me as the Antichrist. She would tell people she would warn people, I'm about to give birth to the spawn of Satan, like Satan's coming back. So when you know all of this growing up, you just think, you hear the word Christian and you think, oh, I'm not dealing with those kooks. But God has a way, and I definitely came back to Christianity actually only within the last year. But that's why originally social services got involved. So the police were called to this one instance, and they obviously noticed very quickly that she wasn't well. So she was actually sectioned to the oldest mental institution in the world. I don't know if you guys have heard of Bedlam. It was the first sort of mental asylum that was.
It's like an archetype for mental asylums now.
Yeah, so that's where I was. That's where I was born. She was sectioned to the mother and baby unit, and the idea at the time was to basically monitor her to see if she could develop the motherly instinct. The story of my birth, so far as I know, was she was very distressed. She had preeclampsia, obviously, from all of the stress. Her blood pressure was through the roof. And she was essentially screaming while stood on a bed, "Get it out of me." And a nurse had to catch me as I fell out. And as soon as I was out, she was screaming, "Get it away from me, get it away from me," because she believed that I was the devil's spawn. The reason I know a lot of this obviously is because there's records and everything, and I've been very lucky that my adoptive parents have always been really, really open with me. People often ask me, when did you find out? Like, was there a moment where you're like, oh shit, I'm adopted? And I'm like, no. And I asked my parents, how did you do it? And they say that when they put me to bed as a child, they would say, Mum loves you, Dad loves you. And then they would use my biological mother's name and they would say, she loves you too. So it was always just sort of in my mind. So we was in this mental unit, the mother and baby unit, and they were monitoring us. And she wasn't developing any motherly instincts. So when I was crying, instead of, say, feeding me or changing me, she would read me the Bible instead, because she thought that it was evil spirits, and she thought she had to do like some kind of Bible reading to scare off the evil spirits that were making me cry. And obviously nurses would then intervene and say, you know, you need to feed her or you need to change her, and it wasn't computing for her. I know that there were a couple of instances where I wouldn't stop crying and she'd get upset to the point where she might throw me down, and then it became a safety concern. I know there was one instance where she actually did throw me down, and I think she felt so guilty, she actually left the mental asylum. So she left a note saying, I'm sorry, and she ran off. She was found weeks later by police. And unfortunately, the level of her mental illness, she denied that she did that. She didn't understand that that was her that did that. So by that point, I was already placed into foster care. As soon as she left, they said, well, this is too far. Keeping this child in this situation is going to cause more damage than good. So I was in foster care from about, I want to say maybe like 3 months up until I was 9 months old when I was placed with my parents. But again, as you mentioned, the process is very, very long. So I was placed with my parents at 9 months old. I came home with them at 9 months old. I wasn't actually officially adopted, so my name didn't actually change until 2003. So this all happened in 2001, but my surname didn't change until 2003 because my biological mother fought against the adoption. So her new obsession then became that there was some kind of world conspiracy against her. She went to the local papers and told all of the local papers and churches that there was this agenda against her to take away her baby. So it was a very long process that my parents had to go through to get sort of custody over me. But they were actually very good about the whole thing, because despite all of this trouble that they went through in adopting me, they kept my name. One thing that they met my biological mother once, and one thing that she said is, please keep her name. So my name's always been Christine Grace, and my parents decided out of respect for her that they were going to keep that. They also agreed to a letterbox service once a year, so they would write a letter once a year, just a page or so long, just to tell her how I was doing in school, you know, what my first words were, what I liked to eat, just to kind of tell her how I was developing. And she would write back once a year. And what's been really interesting for me is, obviously, she's someone who's not very well. So I have actually been able to read almost her internal monologue over the last sort of, she stopped writing when I was about 16, but she would write once a year. And she would write letters that were 60 pages handwritten front and back. Wow. So we have stacks of these letters, and, you know, they would obviously give her a very brief what I've been up to. So to not trigger her too much as well, because if they did say, like, to the social workers, can we tell her more? Because they felt bad, but the social workers kind of explained, like, no, it would be a bit too much for her. And that became pretty clear once we started getting her responses, because we would hear of everything that had happened in her life over the last year, because it's only once a year we did these letters. And it was really interesting for me to see and to look back on growing up, because when I was a child, I read a lot of these letters before I should have done. My parents didn't want me to see them until I was 18, but when you're adopted, I think you're more curious than the average child, because you know there's so much you don't know, so you want to search for it. And I did read the letters a lot earlier than I should have done. When I was younger, about 12, I would read the letters and she would say things like, you were taken away from me, social services are evil, like these people are against me, anything they say about me is not true, I'm not mentally ill. And as a kid, you're kind of inclined to believe her. And it's only as I got older and I read back and I noticed, for example, that her handwriting would change. So she'd be really calm, and then when she'd go into a manic mode, her handwriting would change. And it's only as I got older I realized, unfortunately, and I looked into borderline, a borderline is a cluster B type personality disorder, which means there's a certain level of narcissism there. I realized, oh no, she actually was very, very ill. I started to hear the more graphic stories of what happened, why she was sectioned. And I realized, I became really, really grateful for my parents, because I realized, wow, like I could have had such a different life if social services didn't intervene and if I wasn't put up for adoption. So I will never take away from adopted kids. There is trauma there. There will always be a wound there. It's always going to hurt not being with your biological family. But adoption really is such a beautiful thing, and not enough people talk about it. People don't really talk about adoption. You don't really hear people saying, like, you should go out and adopt kids. The truth is, there's going to be a wound there either way. And the truth is, the wound I would have had growing up in my biological family's care compared to the wound I have now would have been far greater. And if I'm being completely honest and brutal here, chances are if I was raised by my biological mother, I probably wouldn't be alive here today. That's how dangerous and severe it was for my case. So, adoption for me really saved my life, and I will always advocate for it, because if it wasn't for adoption, I wouldn't be here today.
Amen.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing a bit of your story. I really appreciate it. We do a lot of work in adoption at Them Before Us, because adoption has been absolutely co-opted by two very different forces to center the conversation around adults. But the proper understanding of adoption is a child-centric institution. It is always about the best interest of the child. There are a lot of people that will say things like, well, I'm infertile, this is a way for me to build my family. The answer is no, it's not.
Yes.
This is not about creating kids. This is about the child receiving the parents that they deserve. And then there's other people that will say, well, I'm a gay couple and I have a right to adopt. And the answer is no, you don't. No adult has a right to a child that is not biologically theirs. Right. Children have a right to be adopted. So again, at Them Before Us, we are always centering the conversation on the well-being of the child. Now, this has come under extreme fire, both from the people that say, I've got a right to be adopted, but also this critical race theory mood has taken hold of the foster and adoption care in the United States as well, where they're saying it would be traumatic, for example, for a Black child to be placed with white parents.
Yeah, we have that over here. They yes. At least when I was adopted, I don't know if it's the same now. I think it's changing more recently, but when I was adopted, so we're talking 2001, you had to be like matched. So I could never have been adopted by a Black family. They wouldn't have allowed it. And the same if it was a Black baby, they wouldn't have allowed a white family to adopt them. But I think it is slowly changing over here.
Well, that has not been the norm in the United States. I mean, in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, I know a lot of white parents that adopted Black children because there's not enough Black parents to adopt Black babies. But now, because they have so racialized the conversation, now they are inclined to leave Black and minority children in abusive or dysfunctional homes to the point where they are being abused and they are dying because they're not being removed from homes where they've
gone backwards in America. Because over here it was that there was this trauma argument of, you can't place a white child with a Black family and you can't place a Black child with a white family because they might grow up feeling like they don't fit in or whatever. And now it's becoming, no, we need to get these kids adopted. Whoever's willing to take up that role, we need to do it. Is it the opposite?
It's right. In America these days, we really had I would say, there's always been problems in adoption. There have always been too much preference for people who have the money, especially when it comes to private adoptions and drug-free infants. But there now is a problem in terms of not allowing children to be adopted that genuinely need to be adopted, not allowing us to remove the parental rights from adults who very clearly are not fit, and then moving children into this state of guardianship or kind of permanent limbo. And that is incredibly damaging to children too. So we have to get back to the idea that adoption is about the best interest of the child, period. And sometimes that means being placed with a family that is not the same race. I agree that it is important when you can to have, for example, like my child is Chinese and he is adopted from China. It would have been better, A, for his birth parents to have kept him, B, for a Chinese couple that was in his kinship network to adopt him, C, a Chinese couple in China to adopt him. None of those were available. So you know what? He gets white parents who love the Chinese people, who spoke Chinese to him for the first couple of years of his life, who understand that this is about the best interest of the child, who have gone through screening and vetting and background checks to ensure that they are going to love him and nurture him the same way they nurture their 3 biological children. I mean, that's what adoption is best interest of the child.
Yeah.
We also have made some errors on the right when it comes to adoption, because we have too quickly said, oh, unplanned pregnancy, adoption. And that's not the solution. Adoption is not the solution to an unplanned pregnancy. Parenting is the solution to an unplanned pregnancy. If you are pregnant and unexpected, the solution is not to give the baby to somebody else. The solution is to reorient your lives around that baby, both the mother and the father. So the child's right to life and right to their mother and father is protected. The solution is for adults to do hard things for kids, because adoptees, even the ones that are raised by loving heterosexual married parents, experience what adoptees themselves call a primal wound.
Yeah.
There is loss. There is a wound that goes along with losing your mother, especially on the day that you're born. It is something that overwhelmingly adoptees have identified as making it more difficult for them to trust and attach.
Yep.
They have abandonment fears that may seem irrational to adoptive parents, but that are largely reported among adoptees. And, what the difference is, we talk a lot about reproductive technologies, and people will say, well, then you must be against adoption. And the answer is, adoption is a way that we seek to mend the wound that children have experienced at birth. Reproductive technologies inflict that wound on purpose and for commercial processes. In both of these areas, children have a wound. But in adoption, adults are actually doing hard things to mend it. In reproductive technologies, adults are inflicting it for commercial purposes. So we have done a lot of work on adoption. We've got an entire chapter on it in our book, Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement. But the short answer is the answer with everything. And that is, adults need to sacrifice for kids and not ask kids to sacrifice for adults.
Yeah, I always say that, the thing is with adoption, we need to get rid of this idea that, I can't have my own children, I'll just adopt. Because then what you have is parents who are expecting a child that's not theirs to be a clean slate. And people need to understand that taking on an adopted child is not going to be like raising your own biological child, because that child has, like you say, already got this primal wound. And it does pose lifelong issues, And it's things that people have to deal with as an adoptee myself. Everything you said, trust issues, abandonment issues, I've experienced that. And I had the perfect textbook adopted parents. So it doesn't even matter how good the situation is, that wound is always going to be there. And I think people really need to understand that, like you say, the answer isn't to just give the responsibility to someone else. The answer is to take the responsibility upon yourself. And if you are then deemed incapable, then that's a different story. But the first option should always be to be able to reorientate your own life to be better for that child. I think that really speaks to what we've been discussing here today, which is that children need to be at the center of our society again. Because now we live in a society where it's me. The society revolves around me, and I come first, and I come before the marriage and before the kids, and my happiness is everything. And as you quite rightly touched on, you know, you go into a marriage with that kind of mindset, the marriage is never going to work. Because the truth is, marriage is bloody hard work. Kids can be bloody hard work. Okay, we need to get rid of this idea of Instagram and instant gratification that everything's meant to be all rosy and cheery all the time, because the truth is, life is hard, but we can get through it together if we first of all accept it's bloody hard. And I think
it is hard, and there's obviously, with anything that matters in life, anything, there is short-term sacrifice for long-term benefit. Marriage, children are absolutely the perfect examples of that. Yeah, it is going to limit your freedom in some ways. Yes, you are going to have to exist not just for yourself, but you know what? You know, the people that are the most empty and sad, the ones that have never given themselves to marriage, or the ones that have never had children, the ones that have never moved out of that self-obsessed world. Like, that's fine. You can pass on the hard work of marriage and children, and you are dooming yourself to a pretty meaningless life. So that sounds sounds like a lot of fun in your 20s, not in your 50s, not in your 60s. I pity those people that realized too late that they've passed on the thing that will give them the most joy in all the world.
I've wanted to be a mom since I was like 16, because that's, you know, well, actually, since I watched Mommy Dearest, I was like, I need to have my own and Annie, I was like, I'm going to have my own orphanage, and I'm going to take all of these kids, and I'm going to love them. And you know, that has always been my mentality, probably why I mentor so many young kids. And I have my cheerleading squad was ages 5 to 14. And I was like, oh my God, I had 40 of them. But they, you know, it was just, you could talk to them. And when I listen to, when we talk about abortion and the racial aspect of it, just because this child is a different background, again, that's projection of other people. That child's not going to know any difference until you tell them they're different.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. At the end of the day, a child is always going to be more grateful to have a loving family around them than to not have that. And people need to remember that. But unfortunately, times we're living in, that's not the case. So guys, make sure you go and check out Katy Faust and Rayla Campbell, two amazing women who I'm very grateful for joining me today. And go see what they're up to, because they're making big changes. And again, you know, specifically to the young women in my audience, I know you're a small part of the audience, but I know you're out there. Listen to what these ladies are saying, because we have so much we can learn from them. And you've both sort of piqued my interest, actually, into motherhood. And, you know, I think there's something to be said for, we was talking about promiscuity, there's something to be said for the state of young girls at the moment, specifically age 18 to 25. A lot of them do have this idea that, you know, they're going to not have kids because they don't need them. And like you said, Katy, there's nothing more heartbreaking than a woman who's, say, 38 to 45, who then realizes, this isn't what I want, and it's too late. So perhaps I'll have to reach out to you both in the near future to see if we can maybe do something to aim to change that narrative. But thank you so much, both of you, for joining me here today. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I have learned a lot, so thank you. I'm going to go to both of you now and ask where the people can find you. Rayla, where can we find you?
People can find me on Twitter at Rayla4MA. They can also, or X, whatever it's called now, can also find me on Facebook. That's Rayla Campbell for Massachusetts. And if they want to go to my website and help support our cause, it's Rayla4MA.com. That's RAYLAFORMA.com.
Amazing. Thank you. And Katy, where can the people find you?
I'm on Twitter way too much at advo_Katy. You can go to thembeforeus.com and subscribe. We have so much going on with our children's rights advocacy. And you should totally buy Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City and give it to your friends for their baby shower, because honestly, it's just timeless parenting principles applied to our modern cultural moment. And if you train them up when they're young, you will create kids that literally cannot be captured. So that's what we want, is kids that are absolutely free of all of this woke ideology, because otherwise our society may not survive.
Completely agree. We need to raise a new fearless generation. So there we have it, an amazing conversation that we've had today. Guys, if you like this video, please do remember to give it a thumbs up on your way out and leave your comments below. What did you think of today's conversation? And of course, if you've got anything to add, please do add to the conversation, because it's important that we all keep talking to each other. That's the only way we're going to change anything, is by first talking about it. If you want to check out any of my other content, please do subscribe to my channel. We recently hit 20,000 subscribers, so thank you so much to everyone who has clicked the subscribe button. It really does mean a lot to me. Go check out my series that I've got at the moment, Debunking the Lunacy, where I try to give you guys the flip side that the mainstream media doesn't tell you. I'm also going to be going live every Tuesday, so if you've got any questions or any issues that you want to raise to me, please do join me on there, and I very much look forward to seeing you over there. Thanks.